Hi, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the American Composers Orchestra's Composer to Composer Talks. My name is Derek Bermel, and I am the Artistic Director of the ACO. And before we even start, I want to thank our guests today, Meredith Monk and Missy Mazzoli. And I want to thank the ACO staff, who's done such a great work of putting these together. Jade Jiang, Aiden Feldkamp, Mosa Tsai, and Melissa Nan. So thank you very much to our ACO staff. And as well, Lindsay Working, who's our development director. And I want to thank Jensen Artists for producing this series with us, and especially a big shout out to Maggie Stapleton, who's running the show today. Thank you, Maggie. We are being archived here, ossified, some might say, by the Oral History of American Music at Yale University. So thank you for them for partnering with us, putting these conversations in their permanent collection. And welcome to you, the viewers and listeners to this event. I would suggest that you wear headphones because you'll get the best result, the best sound, especially when we're listening to music. So my suggestion, but if you don't have headphones, don't worry about it. It'll be fine. You'll still enjoy the music and the conversation. This ACO Composer series is focused on intergenerational conversations between American composers who are in conversation with each other about their work and about leading a creative life. And so we're hoping through these conversations to gain insight into their works, to the work's genesis, to their own sound, a larger influence on the American orchestral canon and around the world as well. And today we're featuring a work by Meredith Monk called Weave, which was premiered by the St. Louis Symphony. We're going to hear that recording, an excerpt from that recording today. And as well, we're going to hear Missy Mazzoli's work, These Worlds in Us, which was performed at Carnegie Hall by the American Composers Orchestra. We're going to hear a little bit of that work, and it's been performed many times since. So let me introduce our fantastic guests, Missy and Meredith. Missy Mazzoli is a Grammy-nominated composer, and she was the Mead Composer in Residence at the Chicago Symphony. She's known for her operas. She's written with librettist Royce Vavrick, most notably Breaking the Waves, but her orchestral music has been performed all over the world, her chamber music as well, by such groups as the Kronos Quartet, Eighth Blackbird, the Jack Quartet, and her operas at Opera Philadelphia, Scottish National Opera, LA Opera, Cincinnati Opera. Just a very, very wide breadth of work. And we're very happy to welcome Missy Mazzoli and as well Meredith Monk, master of the multidisciplinary, one of my absolute favorite composers who's written works that combine music, theater, and dance. She's recorded extensively for ECM Records, as many of you may know, including Atlas. It's just incredible, epic work that I hope you all can get a chance to experience live. It must be experienced live. Winner of MacArthur Fellowship and winner of the National Medal of the Arts presented to her by President Obama. Welcome to Missy Mazzoli and welcome Meredith Monk.
Hello. Hello, both of you. We're glad to see you.
Thanks for having us.
Would you mind putting the picture the way that you had it before? The person that's doing the technical, because now again I can't.
Yeah, we've been shuffled and reshuffled.
I'm sorry. The other side. The other way. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Can you flip us?
Could you please? Yes, thank you. This is going to be. No. I just have a visual challenge, so I need to be on that. No, the other way. Sorry. Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, you did it.
Here I am in the basement.
Sorry to gum up the works. I want to be able to see the other two people.
All good.
Welcome, Meredith. Welcome, Missy. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And it's really terrific to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And for those of you at home, by the way, please submit any questions or any any kind of chat that you'd like to have with the other folks who are watching, you can do that in the comments section. So we'll try to get to all of those if we can, or as many of them as we can.
So, Derek, I believe you wanted us to start with the story of how we met, which makes me laugh because I was so young, so embarrassingly young when I met Meredith. Meredith, do you remember the day that we met?
I don't remember the day we met, but I remember Lisa Moore calling me up one time. Lisa Moore, who was Bang on the Can All-Stars pianist, and saying, "Oh, I have this wonderful student at Yale, and she knows your work very well, and she's very interested in making operas and working with the voice, and she's really a dynamo, and you would love her. So could she be your assistant or an intern or something like that?" So that's how it started. I liked it that she had both, that her initials were MM as well as mine. So the two MMs. But I don't remember the exact day. I remember many days, but not the first day. So maybe you have more of a memory of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's burned into my memory as one of like the significant days of my early musical life. But you're right. I actually had forgotten that it was Lisa who made the email connection for us. But because I was a grad student at Yale, and I moved to New York for the summer in 2005, sort of between years of grad school, and staying with a friend. And Lisa said, "Oh, you should work with Meredith." And your actual assistant, Peter Shisholi, who was in the frame a couple minutes ago, he was doing a residency, and you said, "Oh, my assistant's doing a residency. I do need some help." And this to me was like dreams come true. And it was, it was so memorable. And I think I showed up on a day when you were having a big rehearsal, and like being in the space where you are at this very moment, and being around all these people, everything was so thrilling, being around for rehearsals, costume designers coming in and out, cataloging old videos and scores, feeding the turtle, my neutron.
Yes.
And it was amazing for me, and I'll never forget it. And it was it always stands out as, for me, the first glimpse that I had, at age 24, of this life that I myself wanted to lead. That was everything that I wanted in life, was like happening in this room. So I've always been grateful to you for taking a chance on this sort of like unknown 24-year-old who was just really excited to be around music.
Sometimes like these things in life, it's like a miracle, it's just meant to be. It's like, I always say that music just transcends anything. It's like you meet these people. It's sort of like the Caress and Kurt Vonnegut, in Cat's Cradle. You just meet these people that come into your life, and they should, and then you realize they're family.
Mm-hmm.
And if you love the same thing, then you're really family. And
Absolutely.
I have never even heard your music. I think I just finished my string quartet with Kronos, a few months before. And I would imagine we were working on Impermanence if it was 2005.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But Missy made some sense of some of my scores. She helped me out on a lot of levels, and organizing, some archives and everything. I mean, what a person. I think you even did some transcribing for me.
I did, for Book of Days.
That's right.
Yes. And that was just an amazing thing, really by ear, listening to the recording, writing it down, inventing notation together. I mean, that was a huge education for me too.
And then I'm trying to remember your piece, and we'll talk about your piece, the beautiful piece that we'll hear later. But I remember you playing it for me as a chamber piece, which I liked. But, I liked it very much. But boy, when I heard the orchestral version, I just felt like this is one of the great orchestral pieces that has ever been written. So it was really interesting, how, it was very good as a chamber piece, but, you needed that form to make the plant bloom. You needed that size, it seemed, and so that's always interesting to me, what's the best form that something takes. And I think in my life, music is, you were talking about interdisciplinary, Derek, but my life is music, and then the other elements, from time to time, I'm lucky enough that those images come. I'm working on a film right now. So, but the music is finished. So now it's more I realized I probably have too many images for this music because the music works by itself in a way. So the music is my river, you know, the music is my core of my work, and that's what I do every day. And then from time to time, sometimes these other, you know, I like integrating perceptions, you know, perceptual modes. So opera was always an ideal, and I say opera with quotation marks, opera, in my way of thinking about opera, was always an ideal form for me.
I agree. I feel like music really started to make sense once I was working in these bigger forms. So I've also really found a home in opera in that it combines storytelling. But really it's just the size of it. You have 2 hours, 2.5 hours, and you know, weeks of rehearsal to bring something to life, and hopefully, if you're lucky, a full orchestra. And I feel like I really came into my own once I had access to a larger palette. For sure. Yeah. So I know, you know, we're supposed to talk about weave. Talk about
around the bush here. Well, I looked in some of my old notes, and so weave was well, my first big orchestra piece that I ever made, which was for full orchestra. Weave is chamber orchestra, but for full orchestra was Possible Sky. I made for New World Symphony in Miami, and that's because Michael Tilson Thomas insisted that I make an orchestra piece. And I think for maybe 5 years I was like, no. You know what I know about the voice? I know how voices are instruments. That's what I've done all my life. But so he finally convinced me, and what convinced me was that he let me have 2 years to kind of work the way that I work with my ensemble. So I would bring in material. And then these were young instrumentalists at New World Symphony. They were very open, and we would try different material, and I would try different instrumental groups doing it, and then we would try it with extended techniques, you know. And so it was that time and the process that made it really exciting for me, and also exciting for some of the players who were able to be there from the beginning and then see how it evolved. So, and it was full orchestra with Theo Bleckman and I as two voices. And I think what was so beautiful about that process was realizing, okay, my whole life I've thought about the voice as an instrument, and now I'm trying to think of the instruments as voices. How does it sing? You know, how can I would sing the material for them sometimes. You know, I'd bring them a score, but I'd sing it out for them. And then the next piece after that was Songs of Ascension, because I had just finished working with Kronos on a string quartet, which I kept to the string quartet, you know, no voice. And, you know, just to really find out how those strings work, how do they sing? And then after that was Songs of Ascension, where I had string quartet and voices. So that was the next development. And then coming out of that was Weave. And I knew with St. Louis Symphony, who had commissioned me, that I had a chorus possibility. So I decided to try to think about 3 entities, which were 2 solo singers, orchestra, chamber orchestra, and the chorus. And then how do I make them into one form where it's not like the soloists were standing in front and everybody was behind. In fact, I had the soloist right in the middle of the orchestra. So it was kind of a shifting field of these 3 layers or 3 elements, and how I could integrate them into one form. And also because I would tend to do pieces that have sections, I wanted to see if I could make a longer form. So, you know, I think of it as kind of sort of a river of time that branches off into places, and then it comes back into that flow, that forward flow. And also the way that I spaced everybody, I had a lot of antiphony going on in the piece. So I doubled the reeds, I doubled the percussion. I had the trumpet and the trombone in the middle, and then the clarinets, oboes and horns and flutes antiphonally. So, you know, I was thinking spatially also.
It's amazing. I mean, I just think like the task of creating a 23-minute form out of nothing and without, I mean, I've become so used to working with opera where your form is dictated by the story, by the libretto, by these characters. I mean, you have so much support even before you write a note.
Yes.
I still think that the scariest compositional thing that can be done is to write a long orchestra piece. I think it's much more.
I guess so. I think so too, but I don't know what I was thinking. But sometimes I think if somebody asks me to do something like that, I think it has to be this serious long form. And usually I think I always feel like if I'm not singing it through, maybe it's not my strongest work. So I always feel like less material, Meredith. I feel like I have to get everything in there. So, I mean, it was very challenging, but also wonderful. And the day that I finished the form, so I was working with Alison Sniffen, who was putting it on the computer, which here's my scribble of the last section. I just for kicks. Wait, I guess it's this direction. So, that's my more scribbles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And here is, I just found these things. I just thought you would like to see.
Oh, this is great.
And then here's my drawing of what I thought the form was going to be. This is really crazy. Look at that strange looking thing. That has all
I love
this.
This is like Stone Age screen sharing.
I love it. I love
wow.
pieces in this stage. Yeah.
Oops. So the day that so Allison, I send material over either on my scrabbly, scritchy, paper or like taped, where I'll lay tracks. And then she put it on the computer because visually I can't do it on the computer. It's too hard for me. So, and then we worked on the orchestration because, I have a lot to learn and she's wonderful. And so I remember the day we finished it, I got a telephone call that night and my mother died.
Oh, wow.
So this thing had come to birth that day. I felt like it was really hard. I'd been working on it for a really long time. It came to birth and then I got the call, my mother died. And there was something that was incredible about that as well, because I felt that the piece was this piece about time and sort of, I know this is going to sound very strange and I don't mean to sound pretentious, but the universe. One of the hardest things about Weave was to figure out the name of it. I had like 25 pages of names because what word do you say that describes this thing? And I remember David Robertson saying, Weave is a good, Weave for two voices, chamber orchestra and chorus, that's the full title, is a good name for it because you can't really name a piece like this, unless you want to do, music for percussion, two pianos and celeste, if you want to do that. So, because it is kind of abstract.
Yeah, and I love the term weave because it's a noun and a verb.
Yeah,
so it can be this thing that you're displaying or something that you're doing through the piece. And you say you have a lot to learn, and I just sort of not laugh, but I just think this piece is such a masterpiece on so many levels. Like the orchestration is so clear, and just like the structure of it, and I feel like, you can tell me if I'm off base, but that the weave idea works on so many levels. Like, so if we zoom in, these motives are weaving in and out of each other in a very small level. So they might be behind and then they come forward.
Exactly.
But then the whole piece is also this weave of sections that as a whole dip underneath the next one.
Exactly.
And I feel like I just want to remind everyone that, we're only going to hear excerpts, and this is a 23-minute work that really deserves to be experienced in its entirety. So I hope that people can find a way to do that too.
Yeah, and we're going to hear the St. Louis Symphony conducted by somebody who I believe is among us right now, David Robertson.
David, my inspiration.
Unless he's a fake David Robertson, we'll never know. But either way would be exciting. There's all kinds of people.
He was exquisite to work with.
Oh, incredible. And there's all kinds of people who are tuned in from all over the world. So it's really exciting, and I'm so happy. I can't even start to name the names because there's just some wonderful people who've collaborated with both of you over many years. And so thank you everybody for tuning in, and keep letting us know what you're thinking. And if any of you have questions, we'll try to get to them as we go. But let's hear part of Weave, an excerpt from Meredith Monk's work Weave with the St. Louis Symphony conducted by David Robertson.
it gets me every time. It's I mean, that last excerpt when everything's coming together. It just
And here's Katie. Here's that little melody that she's singing. I found on the score right there, Katie.
Oh wow!
Here's Katie.
Amazing, so beautiful.
It's always so weird to look at the scribbles and that came out of that.
Yeah, like this little zygote thing became this massive masterpiece. I mean, it just is so striking. I have a question. I feel like
for you, Missy, too, but we'll get when we get to talking about your piece. But I wonder whether you have the same sensation that I do, and I have it more and more as I get older and older, which is that, I can trace, like if I listen to Atlas, I can trace, remember I was at MacDowell Colony, I was sitting at the piano, I remember when that material came up, but then I know the work, I know the daily work, I know the work, but there's a certain point, and I find this more and more, and I've worked 54 years now, there's this sort of magic thing that happens where it's like, you really don't know how it did happen, that this entity, which I always think maybe was an entity in another realm, just makes itself known. That with all that, somehow there's a mystery. There's still a mystery to it for me. And that's the thing that I love so much about being an artist, because, I know I can trace the daily work, which is what I love to do more than anything. But it's that magic thing of being part of something bigger. And it's just listening for that something bigger that tells you what it needs.
Mm-hmm.
And I just feel that sensation so much these days, more and more.
Me too.
Do you have?
There was a question that they asked about what you learned from writing this piece. What did the piece teach you? And that could be in terms of orchestration, how the instruments work, or in comparison with the voice, or just about form.
I think it was the longest abstract form piece that I've done. And the question I was going to ask Missy that's related to that is, she was saying, well, a long orchestral piece is, very challenging. And then if you have an opera, well, you have the text. Well, my operas don't have text. So working on Atlas, it did not have a text base. I had to make my own structure. And yet every time I have set words, like, smaller songs with words, I see that form, on one level, it gives you a certain kind of freedom because you've got this form. And then another level, to me, it has restriction, but which is probably also good. But, it's interesting, like where do you begin? I guess, I think that's what I would say to Missy, it's sort of like, what's the beginning of each piece? And people ask that to me a lot. And I always say each piece has a different beginning. Sometimes it's one little musical phrase. Sometimes it's a concept, sometimes it's a book, or something like that. So,
and we've talked a lot about the fear of beginning, and that is just you. And you were really the first composer who I met who was open about that. But I think I've learned, 15 years later, everyone feels this way to some extent, and just the tyranny of that blank page is real, and it's terrifying. And I have this feeling like when I listen to pieces that I've written, I'm like, I don't know where that came from. And to look at the whole feels just, it is that magic. And I feel like even when I'm towards the later stages of writing and I'm really in the flow and I have this whole palette of ideas that have come before in the piece that I'm elaborating on, I have this feeling that I'm like discovering the music or uncovering it rather than writing it.
Yeah, that's how I feel. It's uncovering something, and you just have to listen for it. You have to be patient. And I always say at the beginning of the process, I mean, I've worked over 50 years and I'm still scared to death every new piece. So but that's the beauty of it. It's tolerating the unknown. And yet it's the unknown that is the joy, the unknown of having a life where discovery is your life, experimentation, discovery, trying to find something you've never done before. I mean, some people have a different idea about music, which is more a product, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just a different way of thinking about things. But I've always wanted to start from zero as much as I can, because I feel like if I know it, why, I want to explore something I don't know. And I feel that way when I go and hear music or go to the theater. I don't want to see what I already know. I want to see something that I don't know. So that's a way of thinking about it, but it's also a spiritual practice to be an artist. And part of the spiritual practice is learning to tolerate the unknown, because obviously in this pandemic, we've all had to learn how to tolerate the unknown. And the unknown is always there. It's just that it's usually in the back burner. Now it's right in the front burner. And so that resiliency and, that kind of sense of patience is part of it. And then I also, for myself, the way that I work with it is I just say to myself, start small. Like I'm at the piano, I might find one little phrase, one note that I love. Oh, I've never heard that before. I've never done that before. And then I know, oh, that's the first clue. It's like a detective. Now I'm, oh, that's the first clue. Now I'm on the path. Or another way of thinking about it is just being playful about it, and playful to be able to generate material. And then when you have to really structure and do the, the real grunt work, that's another part of your mind.
Totally. And this idea of trusting the process, and having faith, having that be a part of the compositional process too. Absolutely. Is something that took me a long time to figure out,
but Missy, it's a lifelong, you sometimes you feel like you figured it out, and then 10 years will go by and all of a sudden you're going to realize I didn't figure it out. It doesn't apply to what I'm doing now. So, but that's the beauty. That's the process of always questioning.
Yeah.
I love this kind of narrative of discovery, like you're discovering, new things about yourself and new worlds within yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So what a transition, right? And
new worlds within the universe that are coming through you. It's parts of yourself, but it's also opening up, expanding your vision so that you actually include more you're open to have come through you. That's the other part. It's an internal process and an opening process, both.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, I mean, it makes you not even want to move on to
what more is there to say?
Let's just keep going here. Well, no, I mean, I just want to move from this one wonderful piece to another, so that we can talk a little bit about your work, Missy, These Worlds in Us, which follows very nicely from what we were just talking about. And can you start by taking us a little more through your language and where you were writing this piece, and also possibly from Meredith's work, what do you think came into this work, maybe?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I wrote this, to me, it feels like a long time ago. So 2006, so 15 years ago. And it's one of my earliest pieces that I still feel very attached to. I feel like it was written at a very raw emotional time, and that gave it a sort of honesty that I still stand by. And it was really tough to write, and so unbelievably hard for me, and to kind of get over my blocks about, orchestral music in general. As a 25-year-old, I thought, if I can't write a great orchestra piece, then I'm not a composer and I should just quit. And it was, so I had put up all this pressure that was really coming from me. And, I'd been working with Meredith, for that summer before I was writing this. So it's all these things were in my mind, things that she had said, things that I just sort of gleaned from just being in the vicinity of rehearsals and watching how she interacted with performers. And this idea of play was very important, because once you get to the end of that anxiety train and you're left with nothing else and you're like, I don't remember how music goes. Who am I? You're left, it's just you. For me, it's me at the piano coming up with chords and melodies. And I started this piece by coming up with a very straightforward melody that is there throughout the whole piece. And it repeats again and again, and different things sort of happen to the melody. Like sometimes it's dragged into glissandi in the strings. Sometimes it's broken up and fragmented. So it's kind of a repeating wind ostinato. Sometimes it slightly changes its harmonic profile. So it's more major than it was before, but it was just one melody. And I Yeah, and at the time, I know that, so the title comes from a poem by James Tate that he wrote about his father, who was a pilot shot down during World War II. And I was staying with my parents for a few months. I had spent a lot of time with my dad, who was a veteran, talking to him about his experience really for the first time in my life. And so then this phrase, these worlds in us, that's where that came from. It's like thinking about the worlds that he was carrying around his whole life. So I think that that's sort of a depiction of the emotional state that I was in as I was writing. It's not a narrative work, so it's not like, oh, these trumpets represent the war, and like the clarinet is my mom, and like all. It's not that, but I think that I think it's important. I felt like I was in an emotional state that led me to be left with something that was very honest and like really from the heart.
And I remember one time you saying that you were so mad that there was this conductor, I guess up at Yale, that they were playing through it, and you would stand up and say that you wanted something, and he was giving you a hard time with this. I remember this because we talk a lot about being female composers, in the world, and it's gotten better, but it could be better.
It could be better, and it was not. This was 15 years ago. And even then, I think, obviously so much has changed, thank God.
Yeah.
Not enough, but a lot has changed in the dynamics there. Yeah. And and this is a common experience. But I think it also has to do with just the orchestral model of rehearsals, where you hand in something, it's supposed to be pretty much perfect. You have 3 days of rehearsal with an orchestra, and then you have no chance to really change anything. And that's really tough. So you end up shouting your, things at the conductor, and it's just, it can be a very tense situation.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's the thing that is very hard about the orchestral writing, because I feel that each person in the orchestra is an individual. So I always try to make it that they feel that it's not just, it is a big body, but each cell is very important. And that would come more from having a longer rehearsal periods where the music is in the bones. It's very hard for them, because they play so well, but it's really more that way of thinking about music, as community.
Yeah, and I do think it's changing. I know composer Andrew Norman, has been advocating, who has had so much success in the orchestral world, has been advocating for more workshops. The chance to try something out, which sounds obvious, but is not usually a part of writing an orchestra piece.
Yeah. But Missy, so I'm wondering what made you go from thinking about it as a chamber piece to the orchestra? What was the impulse? And was the emotional thing, I think, where your father wasn't well or something at that time, right?
Right. Yeah. So
that our parents are in both of our compositions.
Yeah. It was profound, at the time. My dad is still very much alive. But he has struggled with PTSD his entire life, and again, culture has been different. Now there's, I think, a little more acceptance of it, but at the time it was just something he had to suppress, hence like these worlds that were just sort of stuffed within him. And yeah, so it started as a chamber, the original sort of draft was for the group Newspeak, and a mixed chamber ensemble. And then I quickly, very soon after that, expanded it into orchestra and found that again, as we were talking about, found its true form in the orchestra with these big colors. And I felt like everything became actually less complicated in the orchestral version, because you have to deal with big blocks instead of these solos, and that was great. That to me was something I embraced.
Yeah, I think that there's something that clarified. I think it was something about the larger form that actually made the piece have more space in it. And so that you could hear the layers more clearly in the orchestral.
Yeah, and it seems like a paradox. And I tell my students this, like when you have an orchestra piece, it's actually, there's not as much room for ideas. There's not as room for as many ideas as in, a chamber piece or a piece for your Perot ensemble or even string quartet. And Yeah, and you have to leave space for that sound to leave, the 80 people on stage and reach the audience. And but I think that can be a beautiful challenge.
Totally. Well, you're a master at it.
You're a master.
Should we say mistress? Master,
Two
mistress.
masters, two mistresses here with us today. Let's hear the piece. This is a piece that actually the ACO also performed about 6 or 7 years ago, I believe. But I think this recording we're going to hear is the Yale Philharmonia with Shinakam conducting. And so let's hear it now. This is an excerpt from Missy Mazzoli's piece, These Worlds in Us.
Oh.
And we're back.
I think that might have been the spot where you have to stop for the union rules.
Ah.
I don't know. I'm not sure.
It's all good.
You know, to me, that melody, because it's such a long line melody, it also has a very, to me, Indonesian kind of quality to it.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was thinking, I was a member of the Balinese Gamelan ensemble at MIT when I was a student, and so this was written very soon after that. So I think there's something in there, maybe unconsciously, but it was conscious, like the sort of rhythms that are like sort of chopped off. Cycles of like, I forget what it is, even like 7 and 9 that are repeated and then like chopped off was definitely an idea that I think, again, sort of subconsciously came out of just playing in a gamelan. And
also just the just the harmony of that melody, the scale, and the spaces, that line, that long line. So beautiful.
Thank you.
One of the folks listening just commented that it's like you're weaving. So there you go.
There we go. Eminem and Eminem.
Yeah, and you have
at it again.
By the way, you have Martha Mook watching.
Oh, with M3.
Another M, double M. Well, when Missy, when you wrote this piece, you've written a lot of orchestra music since then, including a lot of opera. So where do you feel you've gone since then? What does this piece bring out in your later works?
Yeah, well, I'm always, like Meredith, I'm always trying to do something new with every piece. So my greatest fear is just repeating myself or coasting on something that, this worked before, so I'll just do it again. And I do feel that there's a connection between each piece that I do chronologically, just because I discover something in one piece, but maybe it's the very end and I don't have time to explore that or develop that. So I'll put it in the next piece and develop it into something different. But in general, I really try to set up conditions where I'm forced to do something new. So imagining a new form or having even a slightly different instrumentation or different kind of percussion elements. I mean, this piece had a very limited percussion section. And sort of one of the big features is that it included 2 melodicas, like the pianos that you blow into and have this sort of wheezing harmonica-like quality. And so for a couple orchestra pieces, I didn't do that again and went in a different direction with the percussion. And then I came back to that idea in my Symphonia for Orbiting Spheres, which is an orchestral piece I wrote in 2016, which puts harmonicas in the orchestra. So it was just like kind of returning back to that idea, but in a new form and in a different chords, a different harmonic language. But yeah, and I think that I'm more, I embrace dissonance a little more. And that's sort of, I think, even too generic a term, but I constantly trying to discover new harmonies and trying to work in dissonance into my work. Like this piece is very tonal and always has a sort of tonal center, which is moving, but is consistent within a section. And in my later pieces, it's moving faster. So I'm moving around between different harmonic areas in a little more of a free way. And actually, Meredith, I feel that way about your recent works too. I'm thinking of like Cellular Songs or Backlight, the instrumental work from 2015, which it has less straight, I don't know what the term is really, but less straightforward tonality and a more of an embracing of dissonance. Is that accurate?
Definitely, or more bitonality and just exploring dissonance. Yes, absolutely. That, which is I've always, my piano teacher gave me the Kabalevsky children's piano pieces. I did not do Thompson Book 1. So my ear is very attuned to that 20th century music, and I love dissonance. So, that's been wonderful, and more chromatic writing. You have such, I feel like you're so sensitive to the way you hear my music. I really appreciate it, Missy.
Oh, well, thank you. And it was, I remember it was such an amazing, I mean, like my favorite composer. I'm just going to say, I don't know why I'm embarrassed to say it.
Likewise.
It's just truth. And I remember in 2015 when we had, I think it was 2015, with Meredith Monk and friends at Carnegie Hall, and you let people arrange your work. And I decided I was going to listen to everything you had recorded in chronological order. And was driving around like the East Coast, like just listening to everything in chronological order. And it was the most profound thing. And I saw these connections and I saw the evolution, almost as if it was one massive piece. So yes, it's been such a huge influence. And I feel like, just I could learn so much from studying. I'm just thinking of seeing cellular songs at National Sawdust and feeling like, wow, that is a work that I could study for months and months. It's just so intricate in its construction. And so thank you for everything.
Thank you so much.
Meredith, there's such a kind of a power of the breath in your work, also in your orchestral work. And is that where you feel the center of your work lies?
Yeah, I think the breath is the beginning of everything. And as I said, I've been, when I work with instruments, I try to figure out how do they sing. And of course, the breath is singing. So even I was thinking of Songs of Ascension with the voices and we had a wonderful string quartet and voices. And I was thinking of their bowing as their breath, so it was like our voices were our breath and their bowing was the breath. And there's a section of string songs, which was a piece I wrote for the Kronos. I think it's the third section. It's called Obsidian Chorale, where they all are doing these long tones and the harmony changes very slowly. But I thought of it almost like a giant accordion or something like that, like a big bellows, that the strings had that same feeling of breath. So to me, everything starts there. We breathe and then we die. so here we are back to the cosmos again, but it's true. So, it's beautiful when and, I think players understand that so well. They really want to be given the freedom to sing their instruments and to get breath through their instruments. Do you feel that too, Missy? They just love it, just to be reminded of it. And even pianists, the piano is a percussion instrument, but still, you can still get breath and you can have your two hands talking to each other. There are these more, what would I say, more visceral kinds of idea about the body in every instrument. So when I work with an instrumental ensemble, I always give them a movement warm-up and I give them a vocal warm-up before we start the music.
I love that. Yeah, I tell my students, some of them are probably listening and they're writing their first orchestral work, and I say I recommend singing through every part, and you're not going to be able to do it perfectly. That'd be absolutely insane. But just to have that, to put yourself in the position of the performer when you're writing,
that's beautiful.
And to notice that maybe you're playing a lot at the beginning and then there's nothing at the end, or just all these little things that you lose track of when you're in charge of everything. So I think that embodying it in some way, even just tapping it out, is so important. It's our responsibility as composers.
Yeah, and I was thinking of this wonderful book called A Soprano on Her Head by Eloise Ristad, who was like she was a piano teacher, but the way that she developed her work was to, for example, if someone was playing a concerto or a piano piece and they were tense and they're rehearsing and they're performing, she would have them dance it. Just what you're saying, or sing it. Mm-hmm. So that, and the soprano on her head, the soprano could not get her high note, so she made her stand on her head and she got her high note. So it's more that thing of this embodiment, I think, in all of the arts that we're doing, all the parts of music, instrumentalists, and even thinking about composing and singing. This feeling of embodiment is very important, particularly in the time that we're living in now, where we're on the flat screen. Mm-hmm. So we have to convey that as teachers and as composers to the players and singers. It is not separated. The embodiment is what it's about, in performing. And space as an ally, which is something that we don't have, again, on the flat screen. But I think that music is not usually taught that way, in my experience. That instrumentalists and singers also, they don't think about space. It's very like, and you hear that playing. You hear that sound without acknowledging that is very different.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, we're just getting into it here, but
I'm sorry. Am I going off into?
No,
This is amazing.
Kingdom Come here.
No, it's great. It's so great to see both of you, and I'm sorry that can't say hi in person, but I really want to thank you. I mean, we could obviously go on, and the obviously we're getting lots of appreciation from the many people who are tuned in. So thank all of them. Thank you to the audience who came today to participate. I just want to say that ACO is also offering a lot of professional development seminars, webinars that you can find on our website. And our next composer to composer talk is actually going to be with two composers who are also people that I dearly love, Tania Leon and Angelica Negron. And that's going to be on April 28th. So please join us. Tune back in. We've got lots of inspiration for everybody. Thank you so much, Meredith.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Missy. It's wonderful and inspirational to hear, hear this. And I hope it'll encourage some people who don't know your work as well to dive in and really discover more about your works in all their forms, because both of you are so, prolific in many different formats, of which this is only one. And so thanks to the ACO staff, thanks to the ACO board, to Jensen Artists for producing the series, to Maggie Stapleton for running the show today, to the Oral History of American Music at Yale, who's partnering with us to archive these conversations in their collection. Thank you so much, Missy Mazzoli. Thanks, Meredith Monk.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you so much. Thank you for coming.